Larry, it's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, sir, for taking a minute
Yeah,
out
thank
today.
you for having me, Joe. I really am looking forward to it.
Me too, man. So let's begin our journey into your good work. An incredible story of 5 years ago, this pandemic was changing everything, the world, us, all of it globally. How did you get through the pandemic of 2020, and how has it influenced the way that you do things now?
So that's crazy. So pandemic comes. I remember March 13th, 2020, my grandkids were not going to school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck? This thing started getting a little serious. I'd been down at Florida. I'd been to St. Martin's. Things were kind of tightening up. They were talking about, we saw a few people with masks on, right? Yeah, whatever. And then the world stopped. So I call all my employees together. So I build roof trusses and floor trusses, my primary business for single family houses and light commercial. I'm telling everybody, look, we're going 30% down. We got to figure out how I'm going to operate. We're going to go into a complete recession. This is where it's going. Well, 6 months in, there's this thing called PPP shows up. All of a sudden, people are like, "Hey, we want to move away. We want to buy houses." Next thing you know, my business is up 100%
Wow.
in 18 months.
Yeah.
And what I learned during this process of being in business for at this point about 20, right at 20 years, that if you can stay in business long enough, an economy is going to come to you. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anything like it. Typically housing goes kind of up. We do well, and then it goes down. We
Yeah.
never had anything where prices doubled
Yeah.
and our margins went up 10, 15%. And we were just making stupid money.
Yeah.
And that's how and it was just so we learned, but then it started just as fast as it ended, and then that's when you kind of get back into reality, and then the realization comes in. But the one thing I can tell people is that I learned is that if you can stay in business long enough,
Mhm.
there's going to be at least one economy that you're going to benefit from, and mine just had to be 20 plus 23 years in.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. And to do that, kids always get the truth out of us. I'm going to put you in a classroom in front of 12-year-olds. It's career day.
Okay.
And the kid in the back of the room is like, hey, what do you do for a living? What's your answer?
So I tell everybody I build trusses for a living, and they think I'm a banker, so they think of trust. So the first thing I always do is I build these little wooden triangulated pieces that you see on top of houses all over the place that have little gussets, little metal gussets on the side of them, or steel plates on the side of them. And so we take your blueprints and we design them, manufacture them, and ship them to your job site. And that's basically it. And if they've never seen a house, it's pretty hard for people to understand, but most people kind of seen something like that. I don't know about, a kid in school, but that's how I explain it. Most people get it.
So what did you want to be when you were a kid? When you were 12, what was your dream gig?
I wanted to be a vet. I mean, I think
Okay.
every kid might go through that. And then I really was really excited about I want to be a truck driver. But by
Oh,
the
wow.
time I'm 14, 15 years old, I suddenly had this vision that I wanted to be, a millionaire, whatever in the heck that meant. I'm older than you, but you think about our generation, if you got a newspaper or a magazine, you're either going to a library, or, maybe your parents got a magazine, or maybe your dad or mom had a newspaper delivered. And I just had this vision of something like that. So I named my first dog. My parents let me buy a Cocker Spaniel when I'm 15 years old, and I named it Million. And I had no idea. I mean, think about it. You're 14. I was 15 years old. I didn't even know what that meant,
Yeah.
right? Now we throw around million. I mean, now with the government, we throw around trillion like it's, billions, no big deal. And it's like,
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's a lot of money,
Yeah.
and that's what I wanted to do. And then at that point, I was like, I just want to be a business guy
Yeah.
because, we didn't know what entrepreneur meant. I mean, that didn't even exist in our world.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to be a business guy. And that's where it started. And I just kind of always was in my mind trying to figure out, like, how can I make money? And I was very highly motivated by money. And then as I got older, I was like, money's just a tool.
Yeah.
It's really the fun, the sell, the deal, trying to get something done that people don't think you can get done when you're buying real estate. I have a lot of real estate now. And that's what I really, and that's what brought me into it even more. Now I just love doing it.
It's the adrenaline, isn't it? I mean, it's like anything, like
Yeah,
athletes and
it's the chance of the loss, and what you learn is you have a lot more losses than wins. I tell
yeah,
everybody it's kind of like baseball. If you can, if you're hitting 3 out of 10, that means you're striking out 7 times, and you're considered a god in baseball.
yeah,
And entrepreneurs, I think, have less batting averages than that.
yeah. Yeah. So what were the foundational elements? Take me back to your childhood. What gave you this energy, this acumen, this success? What were the seeds that were planted that were harvested into you?
So I wrote a book called Born or Made, Fear is a Liar, Defeat is Overrated. I started writing that about 2 years ago, and it was a journey. And my mom had died, and I just kind of had this. Someone asked me, "You should write a book," and I got lucky, and a publicist was like, "I can help you." I'm like, "Oh," because I graduated 142 out of 147 in my high school class, so I was not going to college.
Yeah,
And so I started writing this book, and my mom was dead, and I couldn't really talk. So I asked my dad, and my dad's like, I don't know. I was working. I don't know. But I always remember my mom was like, hey, when you were 3 years old, you were talking to adults. You were a salesman the day you were born. And then I started going back, and then I started realizing, like, I would get defeated, and I use this term defeated or inspired. And I started realizing that what I had was, if I got defeated, I would take that energy and I would make it and I would have it inspire me.
yeah,
So if I got, something went wrong or something, typically was sports related or, something like that, I'd be like, I'm never going to let that happen again. So I get stronger. I would run when other kids were sitting on the couch, and I just had this incredible thing in it. And I didn't realize it until writing the book is I had discipline, and I don't, and I had hard work ethic. But my parents didn't run. My parents weren't my dad was a baseball player, and stuff like that. But we didn't have that in us. It was just something I was born with. And then I was able to hone it. And then now, 62 years later, I look and I'm like, I'm a disciplined guy.
yeah.
And that's when, and I just realized I was born with that. But so I was a salesman, and then I realized I was disciplined. And those two things just worked really well for me.
So you start at the lumberyard at 18, you end up building an
Yeah.
empire. What was one of the most pivotal points of that ascension from being in the lumberyard to the dream of owning the business and being successful? What was that?
There was lots of little things. I remember this one thing, and I don't know why I remember this. So I'm a yard dog. So now I moved up to a loader at this point. Now, I'm not even in sales yet. I'm 18, maybe 19 years old in South Texas or Central Texas and all. It's hotter than blazes. I mean, it's summer, and
Yeah,
I'm up on top of this truck, and I'm using a bander, which was a metal strapper that we would band this material to the top of these trucks. And I'm sitting on top of this truck on a rack, right, of a pickup truck. And I look and I see all these sales guys walking up the hill to the parking lot, and they're wearing khaki pants. They have starched shirts. They were dressed and they were getting into nice cars. And I'm like, I want that. Like, that's my next step. And so I remember that. And then lo and behold, there's a job opening at the time clock for a stocker on the retail floor. And I got that job. And then the story I remember that changed even my direction is I'm walking through the retail floor. I'm a little scrappy little 19-year-old kid. I got my little khaki pants on, they gave us little starch uniforms, and up comes the stairs is Mr. Merritt. And he's the CEO and owner of Stripling and Blake Lumber Company in Austin, Texas. But at this time, we have about 350 employees. So this is a big company. He's wearing a suit. He's walking, and I'm pushing the cart. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's me and him, mano a mano. Like, nobody was on the retail floor. And this was about a 35,000 square foot retail floor. This was before Home Depot or Lowe's. And I walk, and he's coming right to me. And I'm like, good morning, Mr. Merritt. And he's like, good morning, Larry. How are you today? And I'm like, he knew my name,
yeah,
and he smiled at me, and that just changed. Like, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, the owner of the company knows little Larry Dick's stock and shelves. And that was just, and I write a keynote speech about it, and I say, and the way I ended is like, smile at people and remember their name, because I said you can change a person's life. And he
yeah.
just, for whatever reason, that was the moment I'm like, I got this. I can do something bigger. And that just, it put me on a trajectory. And it's just such a great story, because the CEO of a major corporation nowadays will walk right by these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
And that gave me this empathy of just, I talk to everybody. When
Yeah.
I go to my manufacturing plant, I'm talking to the guy sweeping the floor, because I know what it's like to be that guy. And
Yeah.
maybe I can say something that can inspire that young man or young woman to go on a journey that I've gone on and take the chances.
For sure. Does he know this story? Did you ever tell him this?
He's dead. No, I didn't.
Okay.
What's the crazy thing was, I
Wow.
didn't really, so much of this. Everybody should write a book, because you go back
Yeah.
and you start writing down all these things. Because what happens with most entrepreneurs is we focus on the gap and not the gain.
Yep.
So all we see is the 9 losses. We never see the one win, because our peak is right here, and we're either going into the valley or coming out. And I write this, and I wished he was alive, because there's two guys that changed. That guy did that, and then another guy. I'm 17 years old. I'm not going to college. I watched my father graduate from college when I'm 12 years old. And this guy walks up to me. I'm walking across the soccer field because I worked in this big sports complex in Texas, and I would do the books for all the baseball games. I love baseball. And he comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, Larry, how you doing?" I'm a 17-year-old kid.
Yeah.
And he walks up to me and he goes, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm just here working," stuff like that. Because I guess one of his kids was working or was playing ball or whatever. And he goes, "Larry," he goes, "I just got something to tell you." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "I just want you to know you're the dumbest MFer." He called me MFer to my face. And he said, "For not going to college."
Wow.
And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know, but man, I wore that like right here for
Yep.
a chip.
Yep.
And now I write in my book, I'm like, I wish I knew who he was. My dad still remembers his name. I don't remember his name. I don't know if he's alive or not. I should go up and shake his hand
Yeah.
and tell
Yeah.
him thank you for
That's
that.
it. Yep.
But that was one of those like, all right, buddy. That was what I was talking about. I'll never let that happen to you. I was like, at that moment, I'm like, I'm gonna make. I remember. I'm like, he walks away, and I was a nice kid. I would have never been. I should have told him "f you," but
Yeah.
I didn't talk that way. And I should go up and shake his hand and tell him thank you
That's it.
because I was like, I'll never. I'm going to make more money than that man ever made in his life.
Absolutely. Do
And
you
those are
ever?
those things. It's inspired. You can be defeated,
Yep.
go home and, oh, I can't. Or you
Yep.
go, all right, dude, you're an
I'll
old
show you.
man. He's probably 40 years old. So when you're 16, 17 years old, like I was, and he's old as dirt, right? He didn't
Yeah.
know anything. I'm smarter than he is at this point.
Yep. For sure.
And yeah,
That's wild. Do you remember that show Undercover Boss that they had on TV?
oh, yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, when you were talking about that, about getting out there and talking to people, I'll see viral clips of employees that have no idea it's the boss. And then they sit him down and they said, you embody exactly what we want to do here. And then they get
Hmm.
ideas because it's the people on the ground, it's the farmer in the field, it's the guy that's right there putting the rivets in that door.
Hmm.
They are there every day. And to be connected to that, that's where the innovation, that's where the new ideas are.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, like when I'm having a bad day in the manufacturing side, I want to go to the truss plant and I want to be on the production floor. That's where I want to be because that's my safe space.
Yeah.
I started there. I know what it takes. I understand, and it just makes me feel better. And it's that, I interviewed a guy named Dick Marriott, great role model of mine, and and it was the first time I realized he said he had empathy. So I went up and looked, and I was like, that's my skill
Yeah.
is I have empathy because I can relate to the CEO or I can relate to the guy sweeping the floor because I've been there
Yeah.
and I have no pretension whatsoever. I like to be humble, right? I don't, you got to be confident, but there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. And I
Yeah.
don't want to be arrogant. I want to be confident and I want to be very approachable.
Yeah.
Like, tell me what's going on. I'm asking you, hey, how are your kids? I know your son broke his arm. How are you? Well, he got just show him some love. Give him a little bit of, understanding that, because look, at the end of the day, sometimes I don't like my kids either.
Yeah.
We all struggle with that. Sometimes you don't like your wife, they don't like you. And that's just reality. And no matter your position, we're all fighting the same stuff.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
And a lot of it's right here.
Uh-huh. It certainly is. So who's been that inspirational force or that hero that's allowed you to evolve into who you are today?
Well, my number one would be my dad. I mean, I watched my dad work two jobs. He grew up dirt floor. I mean, dirt floor poor, Danville, Virginia, lived under people's houses.
Wow.
Still won't eat gravy to this day. He's 82 years old next week. And because he grew up eating fatback gravy, but I watched him work two jobs, go to college, build a career, never missed work, and retired at 54 years old. And
Wow.
he was just a guy that he was never going to be an entrepreneur. He would tell he tells me all the time, he goes, I would never do what you do. But I'm like, but dad, and he's the smartest guy I know. I mean,
Yeah.
he's certifiably a genius, and he just inspired me. He didn't even know he was colorblind until he goes in the Navy. He tests off the chart, and he's going to be an air traffic controller. And they're like, "Hey, did you know you're colorblind?" He's like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You can't see green or red." He goes, "Oh, I just thought all the lights were the same color. You just had to pay attention to the position when you were driving." He didn't even know because when you're an air traffic controller, guess what color the screen was? Green.
Uh-huh.
And that's it. And he inspired me to, and he gave my mom and my dad just gave me incredible work ethic. And I tell these people in the story in my book too, is like the one thing my parents did for me is they always made me and my brother feel like we were number one.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they inspired me to be a better man, and the other person that inspired me is I married a woman at, I was 21, she was 19, and she gave me something to be better for.
So, if you could meet one entrepreneur, one business mind, or anybody inspirational on the planet that might help you on your journey, maybe a dream podcast host, who would that be?
Well, my favorite guy is kind of right now is Elon Musk. I watched him. I've read all of his books. I watched him in the Joe Rogan podcast, not to give him any accolades. God knows he's got a lot more followers than you and me. And I just realized how smart he was. And
Oh, yeah.
when they were asking him a question, and he would be like 30 seconds, he wouldn't say anything, and it's
Uh-huh.
awkward silence, right? And he's already like 5 years ahead of everybody else. And I just am very intrigued by him. The other one was Teddy Roosevelt. I thought he was so cool because he had a boxing ring inside the White House.
Yeah, that's right.
He was a political giant back in the day. I mean, because he would work for newspapers, write op-eds under different names against his political, or what are the adversaries,
Yeah,
and just stuff like that, and learning history and understanding his will. He was a young kid. He was going to die, right? He had very, very bad health. And then,
yeah.
next thing you know, he's riding horses in the Montana. And yeah, I mean, he was just an amazing guy. So those two guys, both of their books I read. I've read two books on both of them, and I just think they're amazing
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I agree. So let me ask you this. What has been the motivation, Larry, all these years for you to wake up and to push yourself, to evolve, and to continue to be successful, to take care of your family, to take care of your own soul? What is that energy every day for you?
Well, it changes. You start off at first, you think it's money, then you realize you got to take care of your family. Then you evolve, and my thing is I want to be the best version of me I can be. I read a book years ago, and it really inspired me. He said, my biggest fear is I'm gonna die and I'm gonna meet the man that I should have been. And I'm like, man, that's a big ask.
Yeah,
And so I'm trying to be the best version. I get up every day at 4 o'clock. I work out 7 days a week. I never miss a day. I read my Bible. I spend time in prayer. And I'm just trying to be the best version of me that I can possibly be. And so it evolves into all this stuff. My wife, I talked a little bit about her. I'm trying to set an example for my family, my kids, my grandchildren. Now my motivation for my grandchildren. I've got 9 grandchildren. They have no say so in this freaking crazy place we live in, and I'm going to try to set up, an education fund for them so that they'll be able to go to a private Christian school from K through 12 when I'm dead. And
yeah,
they say, as the Bible talks about, as a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. It's not about the money, but it's all the other things, and that's why writing books, and because I want my kids to say, my dad was such an intense guy, but he had a big heart, and he tried, and but I'm always trying to get better.
yeah,
I mean, I just every day I just want to do one more rep, one more. If I can learn something today, I'm a vicious reader. I try to constantly educate myself, because think about you and I now. If we wanted to learn stuff, we had to go to the library. I mean,
yeah,
people laugh about that. You and I take this thing now. People don't understand. This is huge. I mean,
yeah,
this phone that I have has more brain capacity than my father's computer that ran the entire Richardson, Texas Instrument plant
yeah,
in Richardson, Texas, at 500 meg.
yeah,
This thing has what, 516 or 530, some
yeah,
gig.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's
so
crazy.
anyway, I think people, there's things that motivate you, but I think as we get older, that changes. Now money's a tool. I've got the cars I want. I've got a farm. I've owned planes. None of that crap matters. God's not going to ask you for your balance sheet when you get there.
Yeah,
This is just all peripheral. There's these guys that have come out now and said, think about it. In 3 generations, Joe, nobody's even going to know our name.
yeah,
Someone's going to be living in the house that you worked so hard to get.
yep.
And that just all, you get a lot more philosophical the older you get.
Yeah, certainly do. I was thinking the other day, just taking my family bloodline and going all the way back to the beginning, how long that would take, and how none of those people are in any kind of, anthology or remembered, and it's amazing how
Yeah,
this
I
life
mean,
works.
my family, we've done that. My dad went back to the 500s or some crap.
Wow.
And I mean, dude, we've never had any money.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
we're just paupers, we just pauper, whatever they call them. I mean, we've just never been in. And like, my grandfather's been dead probably 25 years. He was one of the greatest men I ever knew. He had a fourth grade education, supplied food and table and, roof over his entire family and 6 kids. And, nobody talks about my grandfather.
Yeah. 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 So let me
And he
ask
was an
you,
amazing guy.
yeah, sure. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you starting out at that lumber yard, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on this life you've led, the wisdom you've accumulated, what advice would you impart?
Well, today the answer is I would forgive myself early and I would forgive myself often.
Yeah.
I write in there, fear is a liar and defeat is overrated. And fear and this thing in my brain that I'm finally trying to get a little bit of a grip on, I would work harder to learn that quicker. But I would just forgive myself for mistakes, not making the right decisions, feeling like you could run a Fortune 500 company and then can't run a lemonade stand the next hour. Those type of things, just get out of your own head. And I would just, because man, I mean, there's these guys come up with these quotes. I wished I would have thought some of them, but he's like, if you talk to your friends and family the way you talk to yourself, you'd have no friends or family. And
Yeah.
I was notorious for that.
Yeah.
Like I would wake up and back then I drank and did all the, I don't do any of that stuff now. And I would just beat myself up. Like you're a piece of crap. You need to get better. I'd work out even harder, it's almost like abusing yourself. Now I
Yeah.
work out because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get better. And that's what I would tell myself. I would get out of my own freaking way and just forgive myself.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, of everything that you've done and more importantly evolved to at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
That I retain people in my company. I've got 25-year employees. I've been in business 25 and a half years. I have some of the first employees I ever hired. I've retired two in the last 2 years. And that's really been my greatest success because to me, I think that's a reflection on me as a business guy.
Yep.
And that, I treat my employees the way I want to be treated. I had mentors, everybody talks about mentors. Oh, this guy taught me this, the positives. And I look at mentors as, I had some guys that were really crappy bosses, but they ended up being great mentors because I realized that if I ever owned a business, I wasn't going to treat my employees that way. And that's been my number one success. I mean, it's just in business is
Yeah.
100% that I have employees that have been with me for 25 and a half years. And I've got a lot of them.
Yeah. So let's say you walk into a room full of everybody that you've worked with, clients, colleagues, employees, and you could walk to the front of that room and tell them a fun story about you. Maybe an early experience, a wonderful place that you visited, the first concert you ever went to, the best sporting event you ever witnessed, something that might humanize you a little more to that group. What story, what fun story would you tell that room?
Oh, that's good. I've never had anybody ask you that. So as soon as you were saying that, my mind started racing. And the one
Yeah.
that popped in the most. So I'm 15 years old. I'm a sophomore in high school. Right now, at this point, I don't have my dog yet, but I'm like, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm starting to think about all this stuff. So my favorite rock band of all time is Boston.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're coming to Austin, Texas to the Frank Irwin Center, and it's called The Drum.
Yeah.
And guess what? So me and 10 guys, I think it was 10 of us, maybe it was 8 of us, we spend the night in tents outside. And I was able to be like one of the first people in line, and I bought 10 tickets,
Yeah.
and they were $8 a piece. Front row, and I say we were like 20 rows back. We were on the floor.
Yeah.
And I was able to sell 8 of those tickets for $10, and I went for free.
That's
And
awesome.
I thought, dude, I got this
That's
stuff
so cool.
figured out. This is easy. And I mean, it was so much fun. I still remember the concert. We snuck in Boone's Farm bottles back then. I don't know how the heck we got them in, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
we're out there drinking Boone's Farm, and I'm like rocking and rolling, and it's
That's awesome.
Boston. And I still remember that to this day. And so that was kind of my first, like, yeah, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. Of course, then I just wanted to be a business guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
What a
fun. That was a
great
great
story.
story. It was so much. And the fact that my parents would let me even
Yeah.
do that. Nowadays,
Yes.
you'd be like, no way, you're
Oh
not
no.
doing it.
Yeah.
There were kids everywhere.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just, there was a lot of drink going on, but there was a lot of smoking dope going on too
Oh
around there. I
yeah.
mean, it was crazy back then, but it
Yeah.
was different. People didn't do mean stuff. We all
I know.
laughed, had fun, didn't think anything about it.
Yeah. What a great story. So at the end of the day, Larry, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, employees, colleagues, investors, everyone that knows you, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Man, that's that gap or gain, right?
Yeah.
I still think I'm the calmest guy in the room, and everybody tells me I'm just the opposite. Obviously, I have a lot of energy at 62. I'm driving hard still. Um, I mean, I guess I want to think that for me, it's do what's right. I trademarked that. I've held on to that for 25 and a half years. And that's what I think about myself is like, I'm an incredibly high integrity guy. I'm not going to say I've always gotten it right. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm holier than now, but I've just really worked hard to do that. And that's what I would think. I think of myself as I have incredible integrity of everything I do. I just when I've done deals with people that's cost me money, but I don't want anybody to ever leave a deal and say Dick's got me. There's like, man, that guy paid me what he owed me. Even when it took to, even it was to my disadvantage. And that's what I think of myself is I'm always doing the right thing.
As a speaker, what's the best speech that you've ever witnessed in your life?
My favorite of all time is Zig Ziglar. I
Yeah,
mean, McKinney, Texas guy, what listened to all of his cassette tapes. He was just so highly motivated, but because he could take any situation and turn it into something positive
yeah,
to close the sale.
yeah,
And I loved watching him. There's been several presidents that have given speeches. Reagan, Clinton. I mean, all sides of it. Some of the greatest speeches that you just listen to. I can remember, not to get political, but Bill Clinton. I wasn't a fan at the time. I'm a young guy or whatever, and I was getting sucked into the propaganda. He gave one of the greatest speeches of the nation, and I'm like, I don't know why I didn't vote for this guy. I mean,
yeah,
just stuff like that. So but Zig Ziglar is my all-time favorite
yeah,
motivational speaker, sales guy. He knows America's salesman.
yeah.
I
20 year
loved him.
Yeah, he is wonderful. 20 years ago, I saw Bill Clinton speak at the Truman Library. I've never ever seen a human being come into a room and change the entire particle, everything. Just
Like,
triumphant. Unbelievable.
whether you liked him or not, I mean, he was the first guy that ever took us into a positive, and we weren't running deficits. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, there's something about these guys that have this incredible charisma,
yeah,
and people that like you, that you're not the first guy I've heard that. Like, he would just walk into the room and everybody would be like, oh my God, he's Bill Clinton.
yeah,
Because he could speak and he could make this connection. I mean, this is a guy that, really came from nothing. I mean, he's
yeah,
really an American success story. I mean, I wish I'd have thought about the fountain, the Clinton Foundation. That was,
yeah,
I thought was a pretty good deal.
yeah,
But I mean, I just thought, yeah, I mean, he was so inspiring. And I remember literally was sitting in my home, back then we're probably watching a 20-inch, glass tube. And I was like, God, I got to vote for this guy. I
yeah,
mean, he inspired America,
yeah.
you know?
He certainly did. So if
Yeah.
anybody wants to tune into your podcast, they want to get your book, they want to reach out, any of the good business, where do they go?
Okay, so I got larrygdix.com, which is my main website, born or made podcast.com.
Yeah.
My book, Born or Made, Fear is a Liar, Defeat is Overrated, is on every single, platform out there. Obviously, Amazon's the biggest one, but Barnes and Noble, everybody has that. And then all my social media handles are Larry G Dix or Larry G Dix II. I'm the second. But that one's a little more challenging. Yeah. Love to help out. We've got a great website. We're mentoring, business owners all over the country now. And, my biggest enjoyment now is giving back. I just love it.
I sense it. I feel it. Larry, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you, sir, for your energy, for changing the
Yeah.
world, for your time. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.